Hello everybody, this is Mr. Storm and welcome to Forest of Lyrica Part 2. In this video we are going to finish up with the Forest of Lyrica project by limiting our movement, so making sure that our characters cannot walk outside of the game map. We're also going to implement an image, or not an image, but an item structure so that characters can find items, pick them up, and use them in the game in order to complete the game. So first of all, I want to implement the movement restrictions. So what we need to do is we need to create a new array called var blocked path messages. We need to create a new array called block path messages. And then in these messages, we basically just give them, each index has a message tied to the specific location that is, that is unique, that just says, hey, you can't go this way because of, for example, you can't step over the dragon, right? That is tied to the dragon location. So if you try to move past the dragon, you're not going to be able to step over it. Now notice location 4 is blank, and the reason for that is because if we take a look at our grid here, 4 is dead in the middle, so we're always able to move from 4, but we're not able to move from any other location. Like, for example, if I'm in location 3 and I try to go west, I'm not going to be able to go west, right? And so 4 will always be able to move, so that's going to be empty. Um, and then what we do is down here in our movement switch, our action switch, if we move north, what we want to do is we want to check to see if the map location is greater than 3. Okay, so if it's greater than 3, and again, let's take a look at our graph here. If the map location is greater than or equal to 3, meaning it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then that'll allow us to move up, right? Basically, if it's less than 3, 0, 1, or 2, then we can't move north. So we're not going to move north if it's less than 3. So if it's greater than or equal to 3, then we will move. If not, then we'll give them the blocked path message, which is basically how we're going to do it, right? And the same thing for south. If the map location is less than 6, let's look at our graph here. The map location is less than 6, meaning it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it's less than that, right, then we can move south. Now, moving left and right is a little bit, or moving east or west is a little bit more complicated. Basically, what we need to do is we need to determine if the index we're on is even or odd. And the reason for that is if we take a look here, hold on one second. So let's say we want to move east. So let's say we want to move east and we're on, location 3, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a modulus check. What modulus does is it allows us to determine if something is divisible by a specific thing. Modulus is going to divide something by something else, divide a number by another number, and it will return the remainder. So we're going to see if something is not even or odd, but whether or not it's divisible by 3. If it is divisible by 3, then we're going to return either or if it's divisible by 3, then the modulus value is going to be 0 because there's no remainder, right? If it does return something, then that means it's not divisible by 3. Sorry about that. Click the wrong thing. So let's take a look here. 0 divided by 3 is going to be 0. There's no remainder. 3 divided by 3 is 1 with no remainder. 6 divided by 3 is going to be 2 with no remainder, right? So here, if we wanted to move west from here, then we're not going to be able to move west from here, right? If it returns 0. 1 divided by 3 is going to be, 0.33333. 4 divided by 3, there's going to be a remainder. 7 divided by 3, a remainder. 2 divided by 3, you get the idea, right? So let's take a look at west real quick. Where's my west? There it is. So with west, if we divide anything by 3 and we get a 0, then we know we're in the west location. So if it's not, so basically this calculation here says we take our map location, we divide that by 3. If it does not equal 0, then we can move. If it does, then we don't move. Now east is a little bit more complicated because if we take a look here, 2 divided by 3 is going to return a specific value. 5 divided by 3 is going to return a specific value. And 8 divided by 3 is going to return a specific value. The nice thing is the remainder of all of these calculations is 2. So, and none of these other remainders are 2. So it just kind of works out for our favor that our algorithm for solving this problem actually produces a good result. So, let's check it out. Let's do, I don't need to do the math. Just understand that that actually works. 2 divided by 3 returns a remainder that starts with a 2. And 5 divided by 3 returns a remainder that starts with a 2, right? 1.2 or whatever. So that actually works in our favor. So basically with east, it's going to be if map location modulus 3 does not equal 2, then we can move, right? And so that's how we're going to restrict our movement. And again, if they try to move when they're not allowed to, then it's going to tell them that they can't go anywhere based on those messages that we've given them, right? And that's pretty much it. That is the first part. That's how we restrict our movement in this game. So now let's talk about items, how to implement items in the game. So I'm going to replace my code with some more code real quick so we can talk about the items. Let me copy and paste it from my previous project. Copy. And let's scroll down here. And paste. All right, now we need to talk about items. So we need our characters to be able to pick up and hold items and then use them in the game. So what we need to do is we need to create a new array called items, right? So var items. And these are the 3 items we're going to use in the game: a flute, a stone, and a sword. Right? And then we need another array called item locations that indicate where in the world these items exist. So the flute is going to be in location 1, the stone is going to be in location 6, and the sword is going to be in location 8. We also want to give the players a backpack or an empty array where they can populate these items. So we're going to want to give them, the flute when they pick up the flute and populate that into the backpack. Okay. Let's see. I think that's... Oh, we also want to create an array called items I know because we want to be able to type the words out here to get the keyword. So whenever we're trying to say, take flute, take stone, use sword, whatever. And up here also in our actions I know, we need to increase this by adding take, use, and drop, our item actions, right? So, and then, we need to create a new var, a string called item, and it's just going to be empty. Okay, so once we do that, then all we need to do is go down into our switch and add a couple of cases down at the bottom. So we need a case called take, and we're going to call a method called take item. We need a case called drop. We're going to call a function. We're going to call a function called take item. Then we're going to call a function called drop item and call a function called use item, right? So those are those cases. So let's take a look at the take item function here, right? So what this does is we have a variable called item index number. So it's going to take a look at the item itself, and it's going to look at what index of that item's array this item is, right? We're going to pass in the item. And then we take a look to see if it exists in the game world. So if the item index number does not equal -1, meaning it actually exists in the array, and the item location's item index number equals the map location, then you take the item, right? So this is only going to call up when we actually take the item. We type take item, right? We're going to push this item to the backpack array, meaning we are going to add that to the backpack array. Then we are going to splice this from the items array, meaning we're going to remove it from the items array because we don't want it in the game world anymore. And then we're also going to remove it from the item locations array, right? And we're going to send some information to the console so that we can test our game. Now, if this item either doesn't exist or it's not in the same location as us, then we'll send them a game message that says you can't do that. Okay. Now the drop item is even easier. What we do is we say if our backpack length does not equal 0, meaning we actually have something in our backpack, then we're going to take the index number of the backpack of the item that we're trying to drop. We are going to say if the backpack index number does not equal -1, meaning if the backpack or if the item is actually in the backpack, then we say you drop the item. We push, we push this item, or we push the item back into the items array and into the item locations array. Basically, we update the item location. So we can drop items at any location we want. And then we remove it from our backpack. Else, you can't do that, right? So that's pretty easy. You're just basically removing an item from the array, putting it into a new array. Just the reverse of what we did when we took the item. Now let's take a look at use item. This is where we're going to figure out whether or not we're using the items in the appropriate areas. So first, we have to get the backpack index number, just like we did with the drop item, figure out if that item is inside the backpack index. If it is, or make sure, basically we get the backpack index item. And then we want to check to see if it's in the backpack. If it is, or if it isn't, we're going to say you're not carrying it, right? But if it is, or no, right here, we're saying if the backpack is empty, then it's going to tell you, hey, your backpack's empty. But if the if the item is actually in our backpack, then we have a new switch here, and it's going to take the argument of item, and the switch is going to have the flute, the sword, and the stone, right? The flute, the sword, and the stone. And so what it's going to do is we're basically going to give a message to our user saying, hey, this is what happens when you use the flute, this is what happens when you swing the sword, and this is what happens when you drop the stone. Now, this is only going to be determined. So first of all, this flute can be played anywhere. Doesn't really matter where we play it, it can be played anywhere. The sword can only be used correctly in map location 3, where the dragon is. And if we use the sword with the dragon, then we slay the dragon. If we use it anywhere else, then we just swing the sword around in the air and it doesn't do anything. Same thing with the stone. If we use the stone in the map location 1, which is the well, then it says you drop the stone in the well. And then we remove the item from the player's backpack. But if we use it anywhere else, then you just fumble with the stone in your pocket. There's nothing for you to do with it, right? So, so that's pretty much handling what you do, how to use the items, how to take them, pick them, or take them, drop them, and use them. But we also need to give some information in the render here. We need to tell our user if they see an item in the location. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to have a for loop here that loops through the location, or loops through the item, sorry, and it verifies if the item matches up with the map location. So our item locations and map location. So we're going to take our map location, see if it lines up with our item locations, and it's going to output some information here. You see A, and then whatever item it is there, so that they know to pick up the back or the item, right? We're also going to display the backpack contents every single screen so that they know what they're actually carrying if they have something in their backpack, right? So that's a way to, render that information onto the screen. Okay, perfect. And then the last thing we want to do, let me just pull this up really quickly. Copy, copy, copy. Sorry, it just goes a lot quicker than me, trying to type all this stuff out. And I know you guys don't want to sit here and listen to me all day. You actually want to get to work. And I completely agree. All right, so the last thing we want to do is we want to, there's no changes up here, no changes up here. I mean, we're very close to done. Really what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can set up uh, a way to win the game, right? We want to win the game. And so let's make sure nothing new is here. Nothing new, nothing new. Nothing new. All that's the same. Taking items, dropping items, using items. Okay. All right. So here what we're going to do is we're going to tie in the flute because we want the flute to be able to, we're basically going to have some way for us to pick up items in the world based on items we already have, right? Which actually reminds me up here, I think in our take item function, I made some changes. Okay. Nope. Nope, I didn't. All right. So basically, yeah, no, the take item thing is the same. What I did was I made it so that the stone was automatically in your inventory from the beginning of the game. So we'll keep that. All right. So what we're doing here is with the flute. Let's say with the flute's not going to be in the game world until we actually populate it in the game world, right? So I took out the flute. Um, no, I didn't make it so. Sorry, I'm confusing myself. The stone is still in the world somewhere. You have to go find it and pick it up. But the flute and the sword aren't in the game world until you use the stone and the flute, respectively, to find the items you need. So basically, the way the game works is this. You find the stone in one location, you go to the well, drop the stone in the well, and then the flute pops up. Um, then, whenever you take the well or you take that flute, you take it to the cottage, you play the music, and then a wizard steps out and hands you the sword. Then you go to the dragon with the sword, you kill the dragon, and you win the game. So that's basically the logic here. So basically, we're saying we want to use the flute. If we use the flute in map location 8, then the beautiful music fills the air, a wizened old man steps outside and hands you a sword. So then you get the sword. If you try to play the flute anywhere else, it doesn't make a sound. If we use the sword at the dragon, then we win the game, right? If we use the stone at the well, then we drop the stone in the well, a flute appears, it removes the stone from your backpack, adds the flute to your backpack. If you use it anywhere else, it doesn't work, right? So that's the big change we made there. Basically, we made it so that you can beat the game by finding these items in a sequential order and then using them properly, and eventually using the sword against the dragon in location 3 and winning the game, right? And we could add on to this by, once the game is over, we could, have it pop up an alert saying you've won the game. Please refresh the screen to try again, or whatever we want. But so far, this is pretty much, I mean, this is the entire program at this point, and it's 350 lines of code. So I will slowly scroll through this and explain all this stuff one more time, just so that we all understand exactly every single piece of this program. But when your program is like this, when it's finally finished and it's ready to go, then you're good to turn it in and then move on to your term project. But okay, so up here we have our HTML. We have our image element, paragraph, input, and button. Down here we have, oh, yep, everything's good. Down here we have an array with all the location names. We have a map location. We have an images array that keeps the pictures or the names of the pictures for all the locations. We have an array with blocked path messages, basically things that are, messages that will pop up whenever you can't move past a certain area. We have an items array with one item in it, meaning we only have one item in the game world so far. And we have it's going to be at item location 6. We have a backpack array that is empty. We have a player's input variable that will allow us to store the player's input. We have a game message variable, which will display information to the user. We have actions I know, meaning these are keywords that you can type in order to do something in the world, either move or take and use or drop items. We have an action variable here, which is blank. We have items I know, which are these are the items that exist in the game itself. We have an item variable. Then we have our image, which is tied to the image element in our HTML. We have output variable, which is tied to our paragraph element in HTML. We have our input variable, which is tied to our input element in our HTML. Then we have our button variable, which is tied to our button element in HTML. And then we're changing the cursor style. We're also adding an event listener so that the game runs when you click the button. We're going to call the render function so that we can render the game right from the beginning. The click handler function that happens when you click the button will run the play game function. The play game function is our game loop for the game. Basically, we're going to take the user's input, we're going to make it lowercase, we're going to reset the game message and the action. We're going to have a for loop that runs through the action that the user has typed, and if that actually matches one of our actions, then we will allow them to move on, or we'll do something for them. We can also we have an array here which covers the items that they typed in, the item names. This is basically a repeat of this for loop for items themselves, which I realize now I didn't go over when I was talking about items, but write it in there now because we need to be able to recognize the items. And all we're doing with those is we're just storing the action they typed. If it's something that we know of, if it's an action that I know, we're storing that in the action variable. Same thing with items. And then we have our switch where we can handle all the keywords that we've recognized. If they typed, north, then we're going to move north if they can move north. If not, we're going to tell them they can't move using those blocked path messages. Same thing with east, south, west. And then we have the take item, drop item, and use item functions that we're going to call if they use those keywords. And then at the end of the game loop, we're going to render the game. So our take item loop or take item function is going to figure out what item it is that they're talking about. It's going to figure out if that item exists in the game world, and if it does, then they take the item. It pushes that item into their backpack, removes it from the game world. The drop item function is going to check to see if their backpack is empty. If it's not, then they're going to figure out if that item is in their backpack. If it is, they're going to drop the item. It's going to add it to the game world and that map location. And then the use item is they're going to figure out if that item is in their backpack. If it isn't, then the game's going to tell you, hey, you're not carrying that item. If your backpack is empty, it's going to say, hey, your backpack is empty. But if it is in your backpack, it's going to call another switch, which is going to take a look at what the item is. If it's flute, then it's going to check to see if you are in the right location. If you are, then you'll get a new item. You'll get the sword. If not, then you just play the flute and nothing happens. If it's the sword that you're typing, then they'll check to see if you're in location 3. If it is, then you kill the dragon, you save the forest. If not, then the sword's just going to swing around in the air with no effectiveness, right? And then stone, you drop the stone in the well if you're in the right location, and you get the flute. And then we have our render function down here, which will render the actual information on our screen, which actually this should be. It renders the information on our screen. It shows our actual display. So this will output the map location information. It will update the image so that we can, display the image. This is a loop to determine whether or not you have, basically it'll loop through all the game items to check to see if you're in the right location. If you are, then it'll display that you see an item in the game world. And then we have our game message output here. And then we have our backpack being displayed here as well. So it's a lot of stuff to write. It's a big project. Please, please, please make sure that you go through this stuff and you understand each part of this, right? It's better to take it in bite-sized chunks. Don't try to do it all in one. If you're just watching this video just to look at my code and then just type it step by step, you're not really going to be picking up much. Make sure you're writing this in sections and you're understanding each section as you write it. All right, this video's been long enough. This project's been long enough. I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to let you work on finishing this, and then I'm going to let you get started on your term project, which is going to be really fun. I'm super excited to see what you guys come up with. But that is it for me. I will see you next time. Thanks for paying attention.